In this lesson, we will review how to solve quadratic equations by factoring and then find the zeros of each factor. This review will prepare you to solve the quadratic equations on the math portion of the ACT College Entrance Exam. Okay, in this lesson we're going to talk about solving quadratic equations by factoring. Now there's a lot of different factoring situations, so I want to go over as many as I can so you can review and make sure you know how to handle any kind of situation that they're going to give you on the ACT exam. First situation is factoring out the greatest common factor. An example. If you had x squared minus 2x set equal to 0. Don't forget, quadratics are a polynomial of degree 2, so that we're trying to factor that kind of situation. What you want to do in this situation is, what is the greatest common factor? We're going to factor out the greatest common factor. Well, we're going to look at the two terms. What do they have in common? That's what greatest common factor means. And what's the most we can take out of each? They both have an x. This guy's got two x's, this guy's got one x. So the most we can take out is 1x. So if we factor out an x, what would be left? Well, if we took 1x away from x squared, we would be left with 1 left. So we'd have x. If we took an x away from negative 2x, we would be left with negative 2. Now let's bring down the equals 0. All you have to do after this is factor out the greatest common factor. Greatest common factor is the x in this case. Set each factor, that would be the x and the x minus 2, equal to 0. X is already by itself, so we know that is one solution. X is not by itself, so in this situation we have to add 2 to both sides. X is by itself now because the negative 2 and the positive 2 cancel. You get x is equal to 2. So x equals 0 and x equals 2 are the solutions to this quadratic equation. Let's take a look at another one. 3x cubed plus 12x squared equals 0. Now we've got numbers in front of the x's. We've got more. We're going to take a look. 3 and 12. Those are called coefficients, numbers in front of the x's, in front of the variables. What is the biggest number that goes into 3 and 12? Well, that would be 3. Do they both have an x? Yes, they do. What's the most you can take out of each term? Well, we can take 3 out of the first and 2 out of the second, but we've got to be able to take them out of both. So the most we can take out of both terms is 2 of them. So x squared. That would be your greatest common factor. Now you got to see what's left out of each factor. And here's how I do it. I just say what times 3 is 3? And that would be 1. What times x squared will give me x cubed? X. So you got 1x, or just x. Plus, because this is a plus, what times 3 gives you 12? That would be 4. What times x squared is x squared? That would be 1. Do we need to write 4 times 1? No, because that's 4. In essence, what you're doing is you're taking each term that you have here and dividing it by the greatest common factor. So if you had 3x cubed over 3x squared, you'd have 1x. If you took 12x squared divided by 3x squared, you would be left with 4. Now don't forget, we got this set equal to 0. Now we have a factor, two factors. We have 3x squared we have to solve. We're going to set that equal to 0. And then we have the other factor of x plus 4. Set that equal to 0. If you solve for x, what you would do here, you would have to divide by 3. You get x squared equals 0. And then technically what you're going to have to do is take the square root of both sides. And get x equals, being really technical, you would have to put plus or minus in front of this square root of 0. But the square root of 0 is 0. There is no such thing as plus or minus 0, so we're just going to write 0. Here, let me make sense of this. What number would we have to put in here for x for this part to make it 0? 0. So you really don't have to go through all this trouble. Just know if you put a 0 here, 0 times any number we get here would make the equation equal to 0. It would satisfy the equation. Now let's do the other guy. We're going to get x by itself, so you're going to subtract 4 from both sides. And you would get x equals negative 4. Here, let me show you something. When you got a 1x and a plus 4, your answer is going to be, oh, what did we get? Negative 4. It's always going to be opposite this number as long as the coefficient of x is 1. And we're going to deal with some situations that's not the case. We might have a 2 or a 5 or something like that, and I'll show you how to handle that really quick because speed is critical. You got 60 problems in 60 minutes. That's not a lot of time. All right, let's try another one. Now let's go to a different situation, though. Let's talk about how to factor quadratic trinomials. What is a quadratic trinomial? A quadratic trinomial is a polynomial of degree 2. That's the highest power of x, if you will. And trinomial means you have 3 terms. So what's it going to look like? It's going to look like ax squared plus bx plus c equals 0. And the first situation I want to talk about is when a is equal to 1. That means the leading coefficient here, the number in front of the x squared is 1. So really, we're just dealing with x squared plus bx plus c equals 0. Now, here's some things you need to remember about factoring quadratic trinomials. And I got to talk about each situation separately. First one I want to talk about is when the last term is positive. That's when the last number here is positive. Meaning the c. If the last term is positive, you can make your set of parentheses, because it's going to factor into 2 sets of parentheses. You can put your x's in here, and then the signs are going to be the same. When that last term, when this number here is positive. Last term positive, signs the same. So that means you're going to have 1 or 2 situations. You're going to have x plus, x minus, x minus. Why? Because remember, you FOIL. The last term is when you FOIL. If you take a positive times a positive, that will give you that positive last term. If you take a negative times a negative, that's going to give you a positive also. So whenever you have that last term is positive, you know the signs have got to be the same. Plus, plus, minus, minus. Well, how do we know which one, what sign it's going to be? Well, the sign are determined by the middle term, by middle sign, if you will. So you look to the middle sign to tell what they're going to be. Let's go over an example. X squared plus 7x plus 12. And we're going to set that equal to 0 because we're going to factor, then we're going to find the zeros. We're going to solve this quadratic. Well, let's start with the last term is positive. So we know the signs are the same. So we're going to write x in the fronts because that will give us x squared if we FOILed. They're going to be the same. That means the signs in here are going to be the same. Same as what? Same as the middle sign. So we know they got to be both plus. Now here's the fun part. Factoring these are like figuring out puzzles. You got to get the right numbers. Here's what I do. I go to that last number and I go, what times what is that last number? But since this is a plus, adds to this number 7. We're going to not worry about the sign too much because we already got that taken care of. What times what's 12, but adds to 7? 6 and 2? No, that's 8. 1 and 12? No, when you add those, that's 13. Let's see. Oh, 4 times 3 is 12. 4 and 3 add to 7. So that's the numbers that goes in the back. Does it matter where you put the 4 and 3? Not in this case. There will come a time that it will matter, but that's a totally different situation. So you could have had the 3 here and the 4 here. You're okay. And if you're not sure if you did it right, you can always FOIL it out, and you should get this guy back, the original back. Now we're almost done. We just got to solve for x. Now we talked about this. If the coefficient, the number in front of the x's is 1, the answers are going to be automatically the opposite number. So negative 4, and for the other guy, it's going to be negative 3. All right, let's try another one. X squared plus 8x plus 15 equals 0. Okay, let's go ahead and put our parentheses in there. Put our x's in there. Last term's positive. Signs are the same. Same as the middle. Both positive. Now you got to ask yourself, what times what is that last number, but adds to 8? Well, would that be 1 and 15? No, that adds to 16. Let's see, what else gives us 15? 3 times 5. 3 times 5 is 15. Does 3 and 5 give you 8? Yes, it does. So that's the numbers you need. And once again, you could have put 5 in the first set of parentheses and 3 in the other. It doesn't matter because the signs are the same. Now we need to solve it. Both x's have a 1 in front of them, so we can just do the opposite number. Negative 3 and negative 5. All right, let's throw some negatives now in. Let's see. X squared minus 10x plus 24 equals 0. Okay, go ahead and make your sets of parentheses. Put your x's in front. Now, last term's positive, the signs are the same. Same as the middle. Now the signs have to be minus, minus. And we're going to do the same idea. We're going to say what times what is 24, but adds to 10. Disregard the negative. For right now, we're just trying to get that number of 10. What times what is 24, but adds to 10? Well, would 3 times 8? No, that's 11 when we add them. 2 times 12? No, that's 14. Oh, geez. How about 6 times 4? 6 times 4 is 24, but also adds to 10. So that's the right number combination. And again, you can put the 4 in the first one and the 6 in the other one. So let's solve it now. What's the opposite of negative 6? Positive 6. The opposite of negative 4 is positive 4. So that's your solutions to this quadratic equation. Let's try one more just to make sure you got it. X squared minus 14x plus 45 equals 0. Go ahead and make your parentheses. Put your x's in the fronts. Now what signs? Always you want to determine signs, so then all you got to do is figure the numbers. It's just organized. Last term is positive. We know the signs are the same. Same as what? The middle guy. Middle term. So it's going to be minus, minus. Now we've got to figure out the numbers. Go to last term. What times what is 45, but adds to 14? 9 and 5 comes to mind. I can't think of much other combinations. 1 and 45 won't work. So 9 times 5 is 45, and those numbers add to 14. So we're going to put 9 and 5 in there. Solving them, just the opposite sign, so we're going to get positive 9 and positive 5 respectively. Okay, now that we've talked about factoring quadratic trinomials with the last term positive, let's talk about when the quadratic trinomial has a last term that's negative. When the last term of a quadratic trinomial is negative, the signs have to be opposites, like plus in one parentheses and minus in the other. So last term, here's what you got to remember. In a quadratic trinomial, factoring that last term's negative, signs are different. Signs are opposites. Now let me show you how it works with a quadratic trinomial with the last term negative and how you figure out the numbers and where they go, because they will matter, because one's a positive, one's a negative. Signs are different. Numbers are going to matter where you put them now. First example is x squared plus x minus 20 equals 0. Now we see the last term of this quadratic trinomial is negative. So we know the signs have to be plus and minus. So go ahead and make your sets of parentheses. Put your x's in the fronts. Signs are plus and minus. Now here's where it gets a little tricky. Now you got to stay with me on this now. You're going to still go to last term and ask yourself, what times what is 20? Well, you have combinations of 1 and 20, 2 and 10, 5 and 4. But here's how you figure out how to get the right combination. You ask yourself, what times what is 20, but those numbers subtract to the coefficient in the middle. So that's going to be, we're going to looking at what times what's 20, but subtracts to 1. So that last term being a minus not only tells you what the signs are going to be in the parentheses, one's a positive, one's a negative, but it's going to tell you to subtract to the middle instead of add to the middle. So 5 times 4 is 20, and when you subtract those numbers, they give you 1. That's the coefficient in the middle term. Now here's how you figure out how to put the numbers in the right spots. 5 is the bigger number. Always start with the bigger number. 5 and 4, 5 is the bigger number. You look at the middle term, what's its sign? It's positive, so the 5 is going to go to the positive, and 4 goes to the other one. A quick check, you can just look at 5 minus 4 gives you 1. If you FOIL this out, you will get this quadratic trinomial back. Now that we've factored, all we got to do is solve. So as we talked about earlier, it's just going to be, so when the coefficients of x is 1, all you have to do is do the opposite. So it's going to be negative 5 and positive 4. Okay, let's try another one. X squared minus 4x minus 21 equals 0. Notice the last term's negative, so we're going to go ahead and get started by putting our x's in our fronts. Sign's going to be plus minus in the parentheses. Now you have to ask yourself, what times what's 21 but subtracts to 4? Don't worry about the sign right now, just worry about that number. So what times what's 21 and subtracts to 4? It's not 1 and 21, it's going to be 7 and 3. 7 times 3 is 21, but when you subtract those numbers you get 4. 7's the bigger number, so let's figure out where that 7's going to go. It goes to the sign of that middle term. That middle term is negative, so the 7's got to go with the minus, and the 3 has to go in the other spot. Now that it's set equal to 0, let's go ahead and solve real quick. X equals, for this factor, it's going to be negative 3, and for the other one, positive 7. Okay, let's take a look at one more. X squared minus 3x minus 40. And say that's equal to 0. Go ahead and put your parentheses in there. Go ahead and put your x's in there. And last term's negative, sign's got to be plus minus. What times what is 40 but subtracts to 3? No, let's see. 2 and 20? No. How about 8 and 5? 8 times 5 is 40, but subtracts to 3. Okay, so let's take the bigger number, 8. Where's 8 going to go? Look to the middle. So the 8, the middle's in negative, so 8's got to go to the negative. 3, or the 5 has got to go in the other place. See, one of the things that a lot of people have misunderstandings, they like to look at both the signs at the same time. No, I'm going to tell you, you just need to look at the last sign. It tells you what they got to be. Why has it got to be plus and minus in these signs? I didn't cover that, but let me explain that real quick. It takes a positive times a negative to give you a negative 40. That's why the signs have to be opposites. Now, let's go ahead and finish this and we'll be done. The solution of x plus 5, that root's going to be negative 5, the opposite of it, and the other one is going to be positive 8.